In this video, I'll show how I made the Ring Wraith and Witch King's belt. As for the belt and its components, I went ahead and created my own patterns. I then went and retraced all of my patterns I made for the belt onto some interfacing. The reason is because I don't want my belt to have a thin vibe look to it. I want to give a bit more thickness to it. So I went and retraced all of those patterns onto my interfacing so I can give that nice thickness. I then went and retraced the same patterns onto some black vinyl fabric so I can recreate all those same pieces and mimic the leather effect. After tracing all the patterns onto my vinyl pieces, I then went and started cutting all of those pieces out of my vinyl fabric. I then went and combined the interfacing and the vinyl pieces together and then start sewing them with my sewing machine, but I did it inside out first. When I finished the sewing, I went ahead and started cutting out the excess seams off of those pieces there. I then went and turned them inside out, and to be honest, I had to fight with it as well because it was very thick and narrow, so I had to use a paintbrush, long paintbrush to help poke all that through and make it pull out properly like so. Once I managed to get everything pulled out properly, I went ahead and sewed on top of it as well to bring it to make it more flat, and also it gave more of the natural look of like an actual leather piece was made. I then went and did the same thing I did for the smaller piece to the bigger pieces, and in the next few clips you'll see me assembling all of those pieces together. And voila, now we have all the components ready to go to the next step. As for the piece I'll be holding the dagger, I went ahead and used my hole puncher to start punching some holes where I'll be putting some rivets in place. So I had to measure the distance between each of them, and once I had the first side measured with the right distance I needed, I then flip it over and mark the same hole marking where I will be putting them as well. I also went and marked some holes into the main piece that will be connecting to the belt hoop. So I want to make sure that everything aligned properly with the dagger component to the belt hoop. So I made sure I marked the same area where the holes will be, flip it over again to mark the holes on the other side. And also that helped me to make sure I aligned the same thing for the dagger piece hoop as well. Now that I have all the holes made, I went ahead and start riveting each of those holes together so I can make sure everything is starting to assemble accordingly. Now we have the Mogul blade component all assembled, and now we're ready to proceed to the next component for the belt. As for the sword component, I went ahead and did the same thing, start puncturing the holes and marking them in the right areas as well. So in the next few clips, you'll see me starting to assemble the sword component so I can attach that to my belt as well. Now we have the sword and dagger holders for our belt. Now we have the components built, but we need a belt so we can attach them to it. So for the belt itself, I went ahead and did the same procedure as I did for the components with the interfacing and vinyl pieces, and went ahead and started sewing them inside out first, and then flipping that over as well. And again, that process took some time because I had to snake it all through to make sure it's all flipped properly. Once it was flipped properly, I went ahead and started sewing them flat together with my sewing machine, so we'll have a nice rigid belt as well. I then went and started marking some holes along the edge for the belt itself because I want to help sell the illusion that it's a leather belt piece. So I went ahead and did some holes along the belt itself, and then I went and started hammering all those whole pieces, rivets in place. For the decorative piece at the end of the belt, I had to study a few images and the movie itself to see how it looks and how it was built. Once I had the general idea, I went ahead and created my own pattern on how it was built. I then went and retraced all of those pattern pieces onto some craft foam and some EVA foam so I can cut them out and proceed to the next step of assembling all of them together. Once I had all the pieces cut out, I went ahead and started dremeling all of those edges as well to be nice and clean. I even went and started dremeling the edges of the decorative piece to be more beveled outwards because I want to make sure it looks like metal pieces at the end of the day too as well. I then went and used my stone bit to smooth out the sanding I just did, because if I don't do it, it leaves little hairs of the sanding, so I want to make sure it looks even much smoother after that too. Now that all the sanding has been completed, now it's time to now assemble all of those components all together. So I went ahead and started applying all the contact cement on each of the sides, which will be all glued together. Now that all the glue is all dried up and ready to be bonded, I went ahead and started assembling all of those components all together now. Now that all the pieces are glued together, now it's time to take out the Dremel out again and start dremeling the decorative piece to its final shape. Now that I finish drumming to the final shape, I then use my stone bit to smooth out all of those edges perfectly.
So I built the nice end piece for the belt right here, but one thing I discovered is that it's a bit too thick and still a bit too wide to fit through here. So I got another belt buckle, so I'm gonna try and shave a bit more on the edge, and instead of having this here, I'll have it connected more this way, and to give more space to slide this in to do the belt attachments. So we'll see how this goes, and hopefully it works. If not, I might have to shape a bit on the top here and bottom here to give enough room to fit inside here or here as well. No, that right now it stops here because it's still a bit too big. So we'll see how this goes. So I remove the original belt buckle, and with the new one, I remove the center bar. So what I'll be doing is I'll be able to do a different type of belt hook, and I'll be able to connect through here, as you can see. And by that being said, so now I got this new belt hook. So because I'm tying around the belt at the same time, I'm able to slide this in much better, and I can easily fold this gently in an angle, able to slide everything in, and I can easily do the rest of the belt hook by doing a simple knot this way. So still giving the unique hook, the effect illusion of the belt, and it will have a nice piece at the end down here as well. So I was able to do this way.
Now that everything is working perfectly, this is a little clip I created so I can show you how I attach the belt to my hip and with all the components in place as well. So I can easily say I was very pleased on how everything came together with this test. Now that everything tested perfectly, now it's time to proceed to the next step. So before I start plastic dipping the decorative piece, I had to use some quick seal to make sure all of those seams and gaps on the foam are sealed, because I want to make sure that piece looks a smooth piece as well, like I did for all the other armor pieces. Once that was done, I went ahead and used my 400 grit sandpaper and sanding down all of that quick seal to make sure it's even smoother. Before I can even plastic dip, I need to make sure I apply my painter's tape on the belt itself so I don't plastic dip the belt itself by accident. And then after that, I went and applied at least 5 layers of plastic dip as well on that decorative piece. Now it's time to start painting that decorative piece. So as a base color, I use Krylon Metallic Black Stainless as a base. After I did the spray painting, I went ahead and started removing all of that painter's tape from the decorative piece and the belt. I then went and started dry brushing Brass Scorpion on top of the black metallic paint to give that nice copper feel onto the decorative piece. I then highlighted the decorative piece with Hashnut Copper to give a bit more depth to that decorative piece. Also, all my black vinyl pieces are a bit too shiny and new, so I need to weather it down. So I use Morgas Bone as a first dry brushing effect onto the vinyl pieces. The other color I use to help in the weathering is I dry brushed Rhinox Hide onto the vinyl. The final weathering color I used was Scrag Brown as the final highlight I dry brush onto the vinyl. Et voila, you can see the nice weathering I did on all of the vinyl. It makes it much more weathered down. Et voila, we now have a complete belt system for the Witch King cosplay.